When I come around, got the whole thing wobbin'.
Hello and what's up, MVP Nation? G here with Antoine, and today we're going to do our top 10 rankings for the 2019 NFL mock draft. These are going to be the top 10 players we have headed way too early for the 2019 NFL mock draft. And Antoine, you have a particular grading system, and let the listeners know what it is.
Yeah, it's a scale instead of the traditional 100 out of 100. Where you can't really separate, prospect A to prospect B. I decided to go with more so with the 200 ranking, where I can separate those players from a little bit from player A to player B, more so than I would be able to do with only maybe 99 grades, where your undrafted free agents and your sixth-round picks are almost all the same, and it's like, I'd rather be able to separate those guys, how much I like this one compared to how much I like that one. I found that 200 grade scale was a lot more effective for me, and it's pretty much goes like this, where 200 to 190 is your elite guys, the guys who transcend, who are going to be transcendent, who are going to be the best at their positions, the guy who can be essentially your building block piece on your football team, and I don't always even give out those every single year. If Gerardo knows very well that I don't really give out those grades very well, and from 189 to 175, I pretty much is the first round. 174 to 150 is the second round. Going down the list, 149 to 125 is the third round, and on forth and onwards.
Pretty much in increments of 25.
Yeah, pretty much just tracking each round by 25 all the way until we get to the seventh round, and then everything after that, I believe everything under 50 is priority free agents and guys who are just pretty much training camp bodies.
Right, just a guy who's going to be there just to take up a training camp spot.
They get their shot into training camp, and that's where you probably should value them at. You shouldn't necessarily prioritize them necessarily just to, go in and recruiting them as soon as as soon as the draft is over. Oh, I'm going to make a phone call to this guy. Those are the guys that you kind of like, okay, I'll give this guy a try, but just for the training camp. Those are like those guys.
Right, exactly. And as of last year, if there is an example for what elite grades you've given to guys. Last year, mock draft, you only gave, I believe, one, and that was to Saquon Barkley. He was the only one to receive an elite grade.
No, there was two, actually.
Okay.
Because they scored the same exact grade. So, yeah, there's two this past year.
Oh, him and Quentin Nelson, I believe, right? That's
Quentin Nelson, the offensive guard from Notre Dame, and I gave Saquon Barkley as well as an elite grade. And those aren't easy to come up by for me.
Right, and the grading system, as you said, that is regardless of importance of the position the player ranks, or else most of the time there's going to be a quarterback that should be number one just based on importance.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You always gotta do that, and then if it's like a tiebreaker between two guys, and I kind of almost have to separate them, I do consider positional value, but it goes very minimal.
Right, exactly. And
but I kind of exclude kickers and punters, though.
Exactly.
That has a little bit of value. I'm not gonna put some kicker I think is like perfect ahead of a franchise left tackle,
Exactly. I mean, we're not Al Davis here, so there we go. But yeah, and Antoine will give us the pros, the cons of each player, and maybe a player comparison. And remind all the listeners to please like and subscribe and comment on what you think of the list so far, of the list that Antoine will provide. And also on top of that, just because we have them in the top 10 does not mean that they're going to go number 1 or number 2 or number 10. They are just simply based off talent-wise. Nothing to do with they're going to go at number one or if they should or should not. And this is way too early, so, in a year's, come draft time of 2019, maybe somebody falls off or some people stay, an extra year, who knows. So to kick off this list, Antoine, take it away. Who is the number one guy?
Number one guy I had, and this was like really hard for me to have either one, because number one and number two are just head to head. But slightly ahead, I would put Nick Bosa, the edge rusher from Ohio State, at 6'3", 270 pounds. He scored a 190 for me. And I thought that his hand movement, his technique, is able to bend the edge, hold off blocks. As far as that, those things are all the technical things he already had. He's in a very advanced stage, even more so than his brother was at this point. His brother, obviously, the San Diego Chargers pass rusher, Joey Bosa, who's been a stud since he's came into the league, 10-plus sacks both his first 2 years for San Diego. And he's relatively as advanced at that age as he's relatively more advanced than his brother was at that age. But some of the things that he might have to work on, is getting off the line of scrimmage quicker. He doesn't have the great initial burst that I've given some of these elite guys, because they usually are physical freaks. Like, this is probably the first guy I ever graded that wasn't really a physical freak, And he might not have that first burst like Khalil Mack or Jadeveon Clowney, some of those other pass rushers, but he well makes up for it because of his hand usage, his feet, and his ability to turn and bend the edge, and he just knows how to play football. It's something that he's really comfortable in doing.
Right, and like you said about Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, right there. As most people know, even during recruiting rankings, people even said Nick Bosa back then, high school-wise, was way more polished than his brother was coming out of high school. Joey was ranked, I believe, even in the 40s to low, like 40s and 50 range in his high school, 4-star guy. Obviously completely tore that up, where Nick Bosa was a top 10, top 5 guy. And
yeah, Joey's kind of fell because he was injured his final year at high school,
right.
I believe. Yeah, so it kind of bumped him down the list, where as opposed to Nick, who was healthy his final year, and obviously we kind of could even see the comparisons, and you're like, okay, we're not going to miss on the Bosa 2 times in a row. It kind of became obvious to most of those recruiting sites.
Right, exactly. And also, that also is kind of the same way through this draft process, where Joey is a bit more athletic and a bit more like God-given ability and athleticism, where he is quicker. He's a bit more burst off the line than Nick is. Nick is just more technically sound at this point than his brother was.
Yeah, but not to say that Joey.
Oh, it's not to say that Joey's not. It's just that Nick is just.
And he's not like slow or anything of that nature. I just don't see that initial burst in quickness that maybe that Joey had.
Right. And obviously the player comparison must be easy at this point. It is Joey Bosa for Nick Bosa.
Yeah. That's the guy on my head keeps bringing up. Like, that's the guy I keep seeing. I sometimes even call him like, dang, the Joey Bosa made a really good play when I'm watching tape and all that kind of stuff. It's real easy to make that comparison, and I'm not going to try to do anything extraordinary and come up with some sort of creative comparison. I'm going to go with Joey Bosa.
Yeah. And so now we go to our number 2 guy, the guy you said that's really close to Nick Bosa. Who is it?
Oh, I was pulling my teeth for maybe even putting this guy as number 1. The defensive tackle out of Houston, Ed Oliver. It was very apparent a few years ago in his first game against Oklahoma that he looked like he was the best player on the field. And that's a field that held the number 1 draft pick over there, and one of the best running back prospects I've done in the past 5 years, and Joe Mixon as well too. So there was 2 really good players there, and he looked like he was the best one in his first game. So that's immediately drew my interest. Ed Oliver, he's 6'2", 290 out of Houston. He scored a 190, which is essentially the same exact grade as Nick Bosa. I probably separated them when I'm doing the ranking a little bit, just based on their last name. B comes before O. So O, obviously, Oliver ends up being the number 2 guy. But if anyone has him over Nick Bosa, I'm not gonna go crazy over it, because I really believe that their head to head is pulling teeth at this point. And this guy just like accentuates from pass rush, being able to penetrate, playing the 3 technique. I think I can play him at the 0 gap too, as well, just like Aaron Donald does. He does a lot of those type of things, and that's the guy I came with the comparison as well too. Yeah, as well.
The rise of Aaron Donald, and essentially, has helped bolster Ed Oliver's position or rankings in this list, because we never saw a guy like Ed Oliver and playing the position at that size, because that was
being evaluated, rated fairly high, because we've almost always dismissed those guys. But in history, there has been guys that have been kind of those undersized pass rushing defensive tackles who aren't necessarily just one gap run stuffers,
Right.
Those guys are the ones that in history have always gone higher. The Ndamukong Suhs, those type of guys have gone higher. Not the Ed Olivers and the
Aaron Donalds of the.
The John Randalls. John Randall, I remember was undrafted, and same with Leroy Glover. I don't remember exact what round. It's kind of a little bit in the past. I really would have to look that up. But those guys were where I remember them not being drafted very high, and they always talked about that. So those 2 guys were the predecessors to Aaron Donald, but there's far and few in between guys that, and now we're kind of accepting it, because Aaron Donald's the best defensive tackle in the league, and he's been the best defensive tackle in the league for the last couple of years. You could argue he's even the best player in the league.
Right.
And everybody's now looking for that guy, and Aaron Donald kind of fits his mold. I mean, he's not necessarily as short as Aaron Donald, but he's listed a little bit taller at 6'2", which, mind you, all of these heights and weights are just based on the player profile. We don't get official heights and weight until the combine and Senior Bowl.
Exactly. So we have no idea if he's legitimately 6'2". He could be 6'1". He could be 6'3". For all we know, it's all based on an eyeball test, essentially, at this point.
Or just information from the school that's what their listing is. They're not allowed to measure them themselves, even at the school either. So these things are fairly usually inaccurate when we really come down to it.
Right. And his player comparison is Aaron Donald, as you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of his cons to his game?
Taking on some of those bigger offensive linemen, because you can turn him. If you can get into Ed Oliver, because he's not the longest of guys, if you can get into his chest, you can really move him and kind of direct him. He would struggle more so with the Zach Martins and the Quentin Nelsons, those guys who are really angly strong that can really turn him left or right. Those are the guys who can probably have a better success blocking at Oliver. And there's not much you could really do about that. You could only improve his ability to disengage and engage. His quickness usually just overcome all of that type of things, because guys of his size are usually not as quick as he is. So offensive guards really struggled having to deal with guys like him.
Right.
So, but his positive also can be his negative, being just necessarily that quick guy. If there's a guard who can just get his hands on him, you can kind of control him, especially in the run game, open up lanes for it, and use him at his own momentum against him. And I've seen him on his back, on his stomach way too many times on tape to just think that this is some perfect prospect as well either.
Right. So that's it for our number 2 guy. Number 3, who's it going to be?
We're gonna go right along the defensive line again. This time another edge rusher, just like Nick Bosa. We had at number 1. I have Cleveland Farrell, who is a redshirt junior this year. I thought he could have really came out last year, benefited from it, but he decided to come back with his fellow Clemson defensive line, bring back all 4 starters, and he is he's an outstanding guy. You could play him as a stand-up edge guy, playing 3-4 outside linebacker, or playing him in an even front, playing him as a wide defensive end. You can move him all around the type of places that you can do with him. I don't think that he's scheme prevalent, as you would say. You wouldn't have to have a preference of either one of the schemes. You could use him in either one of those schemes. He definitely bends the edge real well. Definitely can cover in some space. I mean, I'm not going to put him out there and ask him to be Von Miller and cover more than he needs to. But if you ask him to drop back a few times a game just to throw people off, he can definitely do that. And he's definitely one of the guys who really go out there and hunt. And he really caught my eye, and I'm a huge Cleveland Farrell fan. Just watching him, he's one of the funnest guys to watch on tape. And he's at 6'4", 260 pounds. I gave him a grade of 187, which is about 3 points below elite. He's not quite elite because there's certain things in his aspects of his games that he really needs to work on. And he's not necessarily the longest of guys either.
Yeah, what are the aspects that you said that he needs to work on?
Hand placements. Sometimes his hands placements get him in trouble because he'll try to get into the offensive lineman's chest and try to spin around, and he'll just get caught up in his own pass rush and lead himself right into another offensive lineman. Knowing the field where he's at, seeing where he's going to go left and right, those type of things. Transferring power to speed he's very average at that. I'm not saying he's bad at that, but transferring speed into power, which is a huge thing, something that really kind of separated him and a guy like Nick Bosa. Those guys, they can come at you full rush and get into your chest and bull rush you all the way through through the quarterback. Cleveland's not going to do that, and he's not really asked to ever do that because they have other defensive linemen at Clemson that can do that.
Right. And who's your player comparison for him?
I came up with Chandler Jones. I'm not saying Chandler Jones now, but think Chandler Jones when he was coming out of college, when he was an outstanding pass rusher out there, and for the New England Patriots when they first drafted him. That's more so what I am looking at Cleveland Farrell now as opposed to Chandler Jones, NFL sack leader.
Right. Yeah, that's a great comparison for him, and obviously that's going to be great for somebody when they've been able to draft him, and obviously we're hoping to see even more of him, especially with that stacked Clemson defensive line, which we're probably going to hear more about later on. But after that, we go to your number 4 guy, which is
N'Keal Harry, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. I might be in the minority here, but I'm going to be the first one to say it. This is one of the better wide receivers I've seen in the past 10 drafts. 10 drafts. I've been doing this for quite a while. This is one of the better wide receivers I've had. I mean, he's just a notch below the Sammy Watkins and those type of things. And how high I thought of Julio and AJ coming out, but there's some similarities to one of those guys. I'm going to mention it later on when you ask about the comparison. He's 6'3", 216 pounds. That's what he's listed at, and he just is a monster as far as catching the ball. His catch radius is ridiculous. He's a smooth route runner. He comes in and out of his breaks fairly well. He's a mismatch, and all you have to do is really the game that you have to go on ahead and turn on is the game against Oregon where the quarterback was just lofting it up there, and this guy was just absolutely destroying the secondary. He can do it all pretty much. There's very few flaws in his game, but the one flaw that it is in his game, kind of bothers a lot of more people than what you would think. And then obviously he's not going to get the number one ranking because everybody else has to quell.
AJ Brown. They have. Yeah.
AJ Brown. I was going to say to quell Williams. AJ Brown, the wide receiver out of Mississippi.
Right.
You know, he's obviously goes up against better secondaries. The big knock on N'Keal Harry is that he doesn't go up against the big time secondaries because everybody kind of knows that Pac-12 secondaries are not at the SEC level any sort of way. But I kind of ignore that a little bit more so, you know, than most people would, and the fact that in my opinion, good football players come from everywhere.
Right.
I don't care if you're in Division 3, or you can find good players in Division 3, and you're going to find good players at Alabama or Mount Union. It doesn't matter either one of those places.
I mean,
who you face.
Yeah, exactly. Because put it this way, you can argue the 3 best receivers of all time. Where they come, look at where Jerry Rice came from, where Randy Moss came from Marshall, and also Terrell Owens. They all didn't go to no big-time school at all.
Yeah. But besides Randy Moss, he just got kicked out of 2 big-time schools.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it really doesn't matter where you're playing at for me necessarily. There's a level of competition, you watch, and of course Arizona State's going to have better players than Western Kentucky or wherever, you know. There is a number of people, but the level of competition shouldn't be the all-in be-all. And when I really watched both of them, and I watched them back-to-back, I didn't even think they was close. I thought N'Keal Harry left A.J. Brown in the dust as far as just the number one wide receiver. And he profiles everything I look for in a number one wide receiver. And even the way that they play him at Arizona State, they profiles as a number one wide receiver. He dictates coverage at all times on the outside.
Right. And
number one wide receiver.
Right. And speaking of an AJ, what is his player comparison for you?
Oh yeah, you stole it right there. AJ Green, the wide receiver out of coming out of Georgia. How just smooth he was. Great hands and all of those type of things that he can do. He can go on ahead, and if you throw it up to him at any place, we all know those AJ Green highlights. N'Keal Harry has his own little highlights that can match his as well too. They're just very similar in the way that they just and how they just carry themselves on the field, you know, and how much coverage that they dictate. And from everything I heard from interviews. This kid is the hardest working guy at the Arizona State team. You know, Manny Wilkins went out there and just praised him. Same thing with Herm Edwards, and he's saying that this guy is definitely going to be an NFL guy. He's seen some NFL talents, and N'Keal Harry is definitely one of those guys. And I might be. It's hard to say this for a wide receiver because wide receivers are the most position that's likely to bust more so than any other position that are taken in the first round.
Right.
I actually might be able to say that this is the safest player in the entire draft. I feel that about N'Keal Harry.
And that's extremely rare to say that, especially about receivers, because they are the biggest, the hardest, one of the harder adjustments to the league.
Mm-hmm.
And also one that's also under the biggest microscope, and also depending on their situation, you know, like what he could be going to a team that has no good quarterback to give him the ball, you know, so there could be under that scrutiny, and then he doesn't get his opportunities year in and year out, and so that's why you see wide receivers be the most bust because of that, due to a lack of going in.
And also the adjustments. People always talk about, well, quarterbacks have to make this adjustment from the spread offense to the NFL offense. In today's game, it's the same thing for the wide receivers as well too.
Right, because it's such difficulty because you're going through like a spread offense where they tell you to only run like 3 different route tree, and then all of a sudden you go to the NFL and they're asking you to do maybe like 20 on the first day.
Yeah, you're having to learn all these different adjustments. It's a big big adjustment to watch a lot of these young guys having to deal with the learning curve, and some guys just can't pick it up, and that's where they fail. But I relatively feel safe with N'Keal Harry, more so than any wide receiver that I've done in the last few years.
Right, and moving on to your number 5 guy, halfway there now, who is it going to be?
I have another Clemson guy across the line. I got Dexter Lawrence, the defensive lineman, defensive tackle. If you want to put him at nose tackle, you could do that too. Out of Clemson, 6'3", 340 pounds. He moves people with ease, and he's definitely could move around. My comparison that I threw at you yesterday might have not been fair to him necessarily.
Right.
That I came up with, because he's a little bit different, more player than him, and he's even different from the guy I'm going to compare him to right now. But he's definitely a bull rusher. He is the key, essentially, to the Clemson defensive line. Yep. He is what Daron Payne was a year ago for Alabama. Right. He is the key to that Clemson defensive line, because he can play. He takes up all the double team. He can play and take on all of the guys that those guys are. So those guys are free to take on one-on-ones. You can't double team Clelin Ferrell because Dexter Lawrence is dictating the blocking scheme. He's gonna go on ahead, and they're gonna be 2-3 guys on him. So he makes life for guys like Austin Bryant, Clelin Ferrell, Christian Wilkins a lot easier, and even that freshman that they had,
Xavier Thomas, yeah,
him. He popped that on tape, and all of these things are really thanks to Dexter Lawrence, and he's made his impact since he's came in at Clemson, and we saw him in the national championship a couple of years ago against Alabama, and he looked the part of a top 5 draft pick, and right now, I still got him at the top 5. I am yet really to see an awful game on tape for him.
Right. And so who is your player comparison for him?
I went with another one. I know this one was a little bit controversial because I gave this comparison to a year ago and to another guy. I'm going to go with Haloti Ngata.
Okay. You can see where it is.
I gave it to Vita Vea a year ago, and now I'm doing the same thing to Dexter Lawrence, and I kind of don't want to compare every single defensive tackle that comes out to Haloti Ngata, but I see some of the similarities.
Right. It's because, in a sense, where Ed Oliver's also where it's an awkward body type, it's the same thing with Dexter Lawrence, where it's an awkward situation where you have such a talented guy, but he's such a huge dude. And he's a lot more athletic than people give him credit for, just like Vita Vea was and Haloti Ngata years before, when people used to say Haloti Ngata was much more athletic than people gave him credit for what he looked like. And
of course. Yeah. And it goes the same way with Don Terry Paul as well, too. I believe Don Terry was a little bit longer than Haloti, but those kind of guys that are that big and that athletic are really hard to find.
Right. And so now moving to the number 6 guy, who you got?
I ended up giving the number 6 player on this list, Rashawn Gray, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, a 6'4", 281-pound disruptive defensive end, who's right now at Michigan. He's still trying to find his way because they're playing him on the edge, where just like Christian Wilkins, where he did not belong there because he had to, occupy somebody else because there's an older player playing ahead of him there. If you remember Maurice Hurst a year ago out of the draft, that's his natural position, but they had to kind of play him on the edge, and he didn't play out of place. It's just that he was part of that, having to play a different position that is not necessarily comfortable for him, and in a scheme that necessarily isn't designed for him. And he's also having to rotate in because that's what Michigan did a year ago. They rotated him a lot, and so maybe the production wasn't where it's supposed to be. He was highly coveted coming out of high school. Like, everybody wanted him. Every fan wanted him to come to their school. I believe, was he the number one prospect a couple of years ago?
Actually, Ed Oliver, speaking of which, on this list was the one who got ranked ahead of him at the end of the year by some recruiting websites.
Yeah, some recruiting websites. But
Rashawn Gary was entering that final his senior year. He was the number one guy throughout the whole year.
Everybody wanted Rashawn Gray, and Ed Oliver kind of passed him over, which is weird considering they committed to Houston.
Yeah.
And Rashawn Gray, Michigan, perfect fit as far as not perfect fit as far as scheme wise, but he can go and play anywhere. Good defensive linemen can go and play anywhere, and they'll find a way to get there. And that's what Rashawn Gray is trying to go through. His production has to meet his talent, because his talent is off the charts. He could easily be a top 2-3 draft pick easily with just his talent alone, but he has to match some of the production like Ed Oliver has.
Right. And speaking of which, we've discussed these three guys: Rashawn Gray, Dexter Lawrence, Ed Oliver, and Nick Bosa, respectively. Believe it or not, all four of those guys were ranked in the top 10 according to 24/7 Sports in their in recruiting rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Rashawn Gray being 1, Dexter Lawrence being 2, Ed Oliver being 6, and Nick Bosa being 8. And if you look at it, if you would flip it the opposite way, that's how you rank them in this draft. For Nick Bosa being 1, Ed Oliver being 2, Dexter Lawrence being 5, Rashawn being 6. And now after you talked about Rashawn Gray, who's your number 7 guy?
Number 7 guy, I have Trey Adams, the offensive tackle out of Washington, 6'7", 327 pounds, smooth athlete, good long arms, great technician, got hurt in the beginning of last year, and that ultimately is a reason why he's coming back for his senior year. Instead of right now being in the NFL training camp situations and preparing for training camp and all those good things. He should have been probably in that, but his injury prevented him from probably coming out. And he could benefit from another solid season at Washington, and building up his draft stock, because his stock probably would have fell down because he probably wouldn't have been able to work out and all those type of things. And Trey Adams, he's definitely an offensive tackle worthy of a top 10 draft pick, and we haven't had that in a while. I mean, Mike McGlinchey ended up going in the top 10, but I didn't feel like he was a top 10 player. The 49ers kind of reached a little bit for him, in my opinion. Trey Adams, much more traditional top 10 left tackle, even on tape. That's the guy I'm going to go with right here.
And who do you have him compared to?
Andrew Whitworth.
And
off tackle at Cincinnati and Los Angeles Rams. Cincinnati Bengals, Los Angeles Rams.
Right. Now we go to your number 8 player. Who you got at number 8?
I ended up having Devin White, the linebacker out of LSU, the 6 foot, 240-pound linebacker who's sideline to sideline, makes all the tackles, and you can really tell. Like when I watch Devin White, I watch a guy who watches film.
Right.
Like you can tell that this guy knows each formation and what these guys are going to do. Like I was like, either A, he watches a lot of a lot of film on the teams that he's about to face, or B, he is a psychic. Because sometimes he reads the play before it even happens. And those type of linebackers, like the Luke Kuechlys, the Bobby Wagners, the Brian Urlachers, the Ray Lewises, those guys have the clicker in their hand, and you can tell that Devin White is definitely one of those guys that benefits from one of those from that situation. Athletically, he's good. He's not maybe in the Tremaine Edmonds from a year ago. He might not be in that category as far as just athletically gifted and those type of things. I don't know how well he'll test and where he'll go, but He's just that type of linebacker that just kind of succeeds in the NFL and makes Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl. Just like Reuben Foster, the guys who just know where the play is because of their studies and how they know and the tendencies of the formations. They know on 3rd and 1 if the team is lined up with 2 tight ends that they're probably going to run it. Those type of things, those type of situations. They study tendencies very well and they know where to be at all times. He could probably work a little bit on his coverage skills a little bit because he still relies mostly on him breaking on the ball and reading plays instead of just, actually working on his backpedaling and shifting his hips left to right. Those are things that he needs to work on as far as that. But he's not the perfect linebacker, but he's worthy definitely of a top 10 player in my opinion.
Nice. And
he's good at 182, by the way, the same as Trey Adams.
Oh, okay. Nice. Now number 9, who you got?
His first name I always struggle with. So I'm just going to go on ahead and call him by his nickname, and he's also from LSU, the cornerback Greedy Williams, 6'2", 182 pounds. Can you pronounce his first name?
I believe it's Andres.
Andreas?
Yeah.
I'm usually good with names. I'm really good with names, but it's just one of those names that just slip.
Oh, like Andreas.
Andreas.
Yeah.
Andreas Greedy Williams. Yes. The cornerback out of LSU, 6'2", 182 pounds. I gave him a grade at 179, a little bit lower than Devin White. There's a little bit more of a separation between the two of those guys. Andreas, good feet, sticks like glue. He's always has his hands around the wide receivers. Very physical, man-to-man type of guy. The only thing that he's going to struggle is where a lot of LSU corners, when they come into the league, they struggle a little bit more. But minus Tre'Davious White in that zone coverage. When they start having to play their own zone, I even saw him in a couple of plays that LSU does use on zone coverage that he was giving up some of his own area and just covering absolutely nobody. Knowing where he is on the field is very important, and that's something that he's going to have to continue to grow because right now he's just using his pure athleticism, but those athletic tools will get him a far way. If he gets a secondary coach to actually teach him how to play some of these softer zones, off man, those type of things, if he gets the better coaching in the NFL, he'll be fine. And I think that that's why I have him in my top 10 as a player.
Right. And now finally we go to your last player on the top 10 list. And who do you have here?
Oh, I got a big-time quarterback. You can't believe the top 10 without a big-time quarterback going into the preseason. And Drew Lock is definitely the big-time quarterback here. He has all the physical tools. I saw some of the throws against Georgia, and I said there's only a handful of people on the planet that probably can make that. There might be 2 or 3 people. Now, I don't even think there's a handful. Yeah, you probably couldn't even count with one hand. You couldn't even count with one hand how many people that could make that throw. There's some of the throws he makes. It's just outstanding. Great arm strength. Needs to work on his accuracy, but the thing about the whole completion percentage perspective that everybody has is Missouri doesn't dink and dunk. They're going to go for the long ball. They throw bombs all the way and force you to keep those safeties high so they can run the ball. That is their scheme. That is what they're going to do. And Drew Lock is not going to complete a high percentage if he has to throw a bomb every single time. Where opposed to maybe, I'm not trying to knock one of these guys, like maybe some of these spread offenses guys, like maybe Jared Stidham, for an example. I like Jared Stidham, and he completes a high percentage. But his percentage is a little bit harder to compare to Drew Lock because he's throwing at least 3 or 4 bubble screens in a game, 4 or 5 of those games, and Drew Lock is throwing maybe 1.
Yeah,
as opposed to that, and that's where his completion percentage, everybody just keeps knocking him for that type of thing. And he's a growing guy, and he's getting better and better. And I thought he made the right decision by coming back for his senior year. He definitely needed it. Most guys need it, and he'll have enough game rep belt under his belt that where it won't be a problem problem as far as being an inexperienced guys or not a guy. Because, coming out of college, I want a guy with a ton of starts. And Drew Lock will have a ton of starts as he goes on to his senior year.
And the reason why certain evaluators like that is the fact that because no one game is the same. Each game is very different. You put in very different scenarios, and you're going to be playing against different circumstances each and every time, different variables as you may will. And to have as much game reps as you can means you have experienced as many different variables as you possibly could entering the NFL. So that way, when sometimes a similar, not exact scenario does happen in the NFL, that player is prepared and has already played in that scenario and able to play the same way he did in college and not make the same mistake or not make the same mistakes has made before.
Absolutely. It's definitely. Football is not just an X's and O's. It's definitely an emotional and a mental state of mind as well too. You've got to be mentally set, and having game reps really does help you. I couldn't have said it better myself. And a comp I gave to him, it's another big time quarterback. It could probably make one of those quarterbacks that could make some of these throws in. And I was a big fan out of him coming out of college years ago, and that's recently retired Arizona Cardinals quarterback Carson Palmer.
Okay, well, that's pretty high praise when you have, especially for quarterbacks, because franchise quarterbacks are very rare, and to have that kind of comparison for a guy is very high praise, and also.
But the thing about Carson Palmer was he was graded as a second rounder or a third rounder coming into the year when in his senior year he finally. The light bulb finally popped onto him for his senior year.
Right.
That's where he was able to make his development. And then it also benefited for him for sitting in the year behind John Kitna in Cincinnati.
Right, exactly. And, we hardly ever will see that ever again with these quarterbacks drafted in the first round.
That's probably not going to happen. But Drew Lock does profile as a number one overall draft pick. He's definitely got the size and the arm strength. Definitely a little bit more mobile than most people would give him credit for.
Right, exactly. And to give a quick rundown of the list, you had number 1 Nick Bosa graded at a 190. You had Ed Oliver graded also as a 190 at number 2. Number 3, you had Colin Farrell graded out as a 187. At number 4, you had what's his name? You say it for me. Yeah.
Kale Harry, the wide receiver at Arizona State, graded at 185.
Yeah. Number 5, you had Dexter Lawrence, and you give out the grades to the rest of the guys.
Yeah, at 185. Rashawn Gray, the defensive lineman out of Michigan, graded at a 183. Trey Adams, the offensive tackle from Washington, who was graded at 182. Depending on his health, I want to see him healthy for a whole season. He'll boost his grade up if he can do that. Devin White, graded at a 182 as well. Andreas Greedy Williams, the cornerback out of LSU, he scored a 179. And Drew Lock, the quarterback out of Missouri, scored a grade of 178.
Right. And also to give a good, rundown, when you give a guy an elite grade, that's almost saying, one, he's going to be a multiple Pro Bowler, and probably he's going to make all pros. And
guys, you built your team around pretty much. The superstars, the Von Millers, those type of guys, the Khalil Macks, those level players.
Yeah, and pretty much these are the guys that are, if they perform at their best and completely hit the potential they're supposed to be, are pretty much borderline Hall of Famers.
Oh, yeah. That's what you're looking for them to become. Essentially, that is that elite grade. Is guys I can see as possible future Hall of Famers. Where my first round grades, I'm looking for Pro Bowlers. Guys who are going to make Pro Bowls here and there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into.
My elite grade, I'm looking for guys who are going to become future Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get into with your 175 to 189, or multiple Pro Bowl guys and maybe all pro here and there.
Yeah,
guys.
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Pro Bowl guys who are pieces of your team that are not easily replaceable.
Yeah.
You know,
not the piece of the team, but key pieces to the team.
Yeah, the key piece to the team that are not easily replaced.
Right.
That are Pro Bowlers, hard. You know, what essentially you're looking for in the first round pick, Pro Bowl guy.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's it. That's our rundown of our 2019 NFL. Top 10 players headed into, or way too early.
Yeah, our preseason top 10 rankings.
Pretty much. Our preseason top 10 rankings. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Please head over to Antoine's channel at Draft Day 101. He'll be going back onto YouTube and providing more and more of his content. You will see clips and videos and his more breakdowns of these players that we have discussed and many more. And as always, Antoine, thanks for always coming on to the channel today.
Oh, no problem.